All right, guys. In this video, I just want to go through the 3-4 end of lesson review with you and just talk about a couple of tricks that I use to sort of help out and just sort of get you started doing this. So we'll start with the work together. Again, you got to do the work together and the work on your own, like usual. But these have a few different parts to them. So I at least want to show you kind of what they look like. Let's go back. All right, you're going to open this up. And there's 3 parts kind of to this, and you got to do part by part in order to get to the next one. I've started working through this, and so it is sort of giving me that check things, obviously, but I'll finish them up here. I hope I can still go in. It doesn't look like I can, but that's okay. So we're going to start on this, and you have 4 transactions listed here. And what's going to happen if you read the instructions carefully, say Norma Dirks owns Dirks Copying Center. That's who we're working with. It says on the journal below, because we're still on page 1, journalize the transactions for April 23rd and 27th only on page 1, because what's happening is we're kind of coming to the end of page 1, so we only have 2 rows left, and so we're going to have to record those transactions, and then on the very last line, we have to total prove and rule this page before moving on to the next page. And the next page is where you're going to record the last 2 transactions. So step 1, scroll down and record the transactions for April 23rd and 27th. So if we go down here, I did record those. You can see on lines 13. So April 23rd, Dirk's Copy Center made a sale on account to K Spa. And so I just typed in the accounts receivable because that's where our debit is going to come from. So we need to debit accounts receivable, and then we are going to credit sales. Again, that same special account column is here, so we don't need to have 2 lines. We can do it all in the same line. So our debit accounts receivable, which is our asset account, credit sales, which is our owner's equity account, both for $150. Don't forget the source document, S2. Next one, Norma Dirks withdraws some cash from her business in the amount of $800. So paid cash to owner is withdrawal of equity. It's going back, recording transactions like you have been throughout this whole chapter. We are going to debit Norma Dirks drawing her owner's equity account, which she withdraws. So we're going to credit or debit that for $800, and then we need to credit cash because cash is going down by $800. And then once we make those 2 entries, we are ready to rule this. And so what you do on this last line on 15, you write in the date, which we're working on April 27th, because that was the last entry, so we need to write that. You type carried forward because we're going to be carrying forward these totals that we're going to calculate next onto page 2. So write the date, write carried forward. You don't put anything in these 2 boxes, but in these spaces, you need to add up all of these columns. So these are sums of all these numbers. This is the sum of all the general credits. All the sales credits go there. All the cash debits go there. All the cash credits go there. Then you scroll down, and these are the answers. So I'll let you look at it. That's fine, the working together. These are the totals. If you actually total all those up, this is what you get, okay? Scroll down, and then we have our proving summary for page 1. So you're going to write in our general debit totals equal $5,615. So you would write in $5,615 there. Our general credit would be $3,615. Remember, our general credit column totals $3,655, and that goes right there. You fill in all those summaries. Sales credits go there, cash debits here, cash credits here, and then you total. Remember, our double proving lines mean that these are totals of this number and this number. So you add this plus this. That will give you this amount, 11,170, and then you add this, and that equals also 11,170. Debits equal the credits, and you're good. So a couple of different ways to do this. You can easily use a calculator and just add all of these together. that is totally fine. I want to just show you something. If you get a whole bunch of entries, sometimes it's easier to use something like a Google Sheet. And so I like to actually have a Google Sheet set up to do a lot of calculator work for me, because it kind of ends up being a lot easier than just using a calculator. So I'll try to make these what I can. So up here at the top, I just typed in page 1 because I know that I'm working on the page 1 of the journal. We're still on page 1. And then all I did was I just added the general debits, the general credits. So general debits, general credits, sales credit, cash debits, cash credits. And then I just recorded all the amounts in those columns. So 415, 600. So all I'm doing is I'm following down here and I'm just typing these into these cells: 415, 600, 500, 300, 650, so forth. I'm going to summarize these 3 amounts right here. I am going to summarize these 2 amounts, or these 3 amounts, I'm sorry, right here, and then so forth. What this does, and then I added this piece down here. You definitely don't need to do this. I just wanted to at least show you some different ways. Kind of a nice thing to do with Excel sheets is that you can use a formula to help you total a bunch of different numbers very easily. And the good thing about this too is, say you're using an iPhone and you're totaling all these things and you add up all these numbers and you make a mistake like on the last one, usually you got to start all over. If you're using a graphing calculator, you can usually go back and edit things. But what I really like is I can type all these numbers and then I can spot check them to make sure that they're correct, instead of just having all the numbers go away after I type them into a calculator. So the formula you would use is equals. So in the totals category, just at the end here, you type the equal sign, then you type the word sum, S-U-M, because we're going to add them up, the sum of these numbers. I'm going to add a parenthesis, and then I'm just going to click and drag all the numbers that I want to add up. Okay. I'm going to close the parenthesis. So that's the formula. You just have to type that in: equals sum of parenthesis, click and drag, close the parenthesis, hit enter or return. And that number is the total of all of these numbers. Now I want to total the rest of these columns respectively as well. And all I need to do, I don't need to type in another formula for each of these. I can just click on this little box until my cursor turns into a little plus. I'm going to click and drag that straight over underneath each. And now I have a nice total of each column here. So if you'll notice, the columns 56, 15, 36, 55, they match. So those numbers are correct there. The only other thing that I was just going to show you is that you don't necessarily have to do that right underneath these things. You can type that formula in anywhere: equals sum of, and then I can go back and I can just click and drag all these different things on there and hit enter, and I get the same number here. And then in this case, you would have to kind of just drag, or you'd have to type in that formula for each spot you want to do, but you're just creating sort of a summary category there. All right, let's move on to the next page so we can kind of keep seeing this. So once you finish that, you can move on to the next step. We're going to move on to page 2, and as you remember, at the end of page 1, we recorded entries for April 23rd and April 27th, but we still have 2 entries to make in the month of April. So now we're on page 2, and since we're on page 2, remember, we can go back and forth between page 1 and page 2 pretty easily. That was what we were just working with. Now we're going to work on page 2, and it says, journalize the remaining transactions for April. So we have to journalize the April 29th and the April 30th transaction. And if we go down there, this is what it looks like. The April 29th and the April 30th transactions there. Remember, this last one received cash from a sale. Since both of these are using that special account column, nothing is actually going to be written in the account title. You're going to click and use that pull down menu to select the check. Make sure not to forget your document number, and then you're going to record your debits and then your credits there. So that was the next step. We're done with recording entries for April. The next step, we have to prove and rule the journal for the end of the month, and then we're also going to prove cash. So what I just did here, as you'll notice, so on page 1, this is kind of illustrating that last point. On page 1, we wrote carried forward, and then we totaled our amounts. And on page 2, and MindTap does this for you already, they brought those totals forward to the next page. This does it for you. You don't have to actually type that, which is kind of nice. But make sure when you're proving this page for the end of the month, you are adding together that total, that total, that total. You're totaling everything, including those other totals here. So just like you did for page 1, you're going to do the same thing here for page 2, and you're going to sum up your general column credits. So the debits, that is just going to be 5, 6, 1, 5. The credit columns are going to be those two numbers added together. And over here, I just did the same thing, 5, 6, 1, 5, 316, and we can do that same thing where we did the sum, parentheses, and if you want to, because I know that I have 3 numbers there, so I want to make sure that I'm selecting 3 boxes because I'm going to use that little trick where I'm going to drag things over. So my totals for page 2 are going to be right there, and so I'm just going to summarize these totals here, right there. Now, lastly, remember to prove cash. You're just going back and you're essentially using these totals from page 2 to prove your cash. So remember, cash at the beginning of the month, well, the beginning cash balance on April 1st is 0. So we're going to leave that at 0. Total cash received during the month, well, that is just our cash debits. So our cash received should be $6,330. Total cash, add it up. So remember, that one sum means we're going to stop there. We need to sum up everything above that. 6,330 minus the total cash paid out. That would be our cash credits, 43.85. And then single rule, double rule there. All you're going to do is make that that right there. So you can just do another little sum of, in this case, I want to select the cash that came in minus the cash that went out equals that. Close my parentheses for the formula, hit enter, and then my cash balance should be $19.45. And that should be it. Make sure you submit. Make sure I did it right. Yep, down there, everything's good. And so work through this, work through the working on your own, which is the exact same as this, using different numbers in a different business, and email with questions.